Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute. I almost didn't film a video this week, even though I promised myself like my New Year's bookish goal was that I was going to absolutely record a YouTube video every week. But then I realized I literally have no excuse for it because I took this past week off. Little life update. Took this past week off work. No reason. I was just tired of working the Eastern hours in the Nigerian hours. I also just wanted to have a week where I could enjoy Nigeria without having to be home at 3 p.m. for work. And so I took this week off. I actually thought I was going to film so much. I was like, I'm going to get so much done. I'm going to film so many tips. I gave up TikTok for Lent. Another life update, but I thought I was going to film so many Instagram videos, Instagram Reels, so many YouTube videos. Didn't do any of that. I lazed around, hung out with friends, drank midday. It is what it is. But yeah, giving up TikTok for Lent, also giving up Threads. So those are two platforms that you follow me on. You will not see me on there until whenever Lent ends. I love TikTok. The people I follow, I love it so much. I'm just like, it's just nothing, it's nothing to apologize for, but it is what it is. And I realized that, okay, I need to just give this up and like just try to see life without it. And Threads, I'm not addicted to Threads at all. That is actually, I would say that TikTok isn't really doom scrolling for me because I enjoy myself on TikTok. Threads, I'm gonna use my books to hold this down. Threads is really what is doom scrolling because everyone there is so angry and mean, especially in the bookish community. Everyone wants to show how good of a person they are, and it's really icky and gross. And so even though I'm not addicted to Threads, I do consider that to be like actual doom scrolling. And I also don't really like the people on there. I don't really like myself on there as well, like to be completely frank. So I was like, why am I on here? So actually TikTok, I might go back on. Actually, I probably will go back on after Lent and just try to use it less. But Threads, I fully want to give up because the people there are so annoying and gross. And like they give off, I never had a good like high school experience. And so I'm trying to recreate it by being a mean girl on the internet and trying to like impress other 20, 30 plus year olds. It's so weird. And I also don't like how I react to those kind of people. So if you follow me on Threads, I think I'm done with that. It's just not for me. But also new scenery. This is another thing that I really wanted to do during my week off, really just like any day because I literally live here, was to use my parents' gazebo / garden as a like a backdrop for my videos. But again, was super lazy, didn't really do much this week off. And so this is actually like the day before I go back to work. Today's Sunday, I go back to work tomorrow, and I'm like, wow, I did nothing. And I'm now just like finally being like, you know what? It's daylight hours. It's not too hot. Let me do what I said I was going to do and film this video. Ignore the sweating. Of course, I am outside. It's going to be a rough one for all of us. But yeah, so that's my life update. Also, one more thing. I am going to be in New York. I am moving to New York. Finally, that has been my dream for like years now. Years. To move to the States was my first dream. And then I realized that, oh my God, I love New York so much. When I got my first opportunity to move to the States, it was Miami. And I was like, you know what? This is fine. I've always wanted to live in a place in North America that was hot 24/7 just to experience that. But New York, I knew was going to be my end goal. So I signed a lease like 3-4 days ago. It is $1,000 above my budget that I first had for myself. And it's $1,300 more than what I was paying in Miami. So, damn. Anyways, that's what it is. So if you live in New York, I'm like collecting bookish friends. I've like posted on my Instagram. I have like 3 or 4 girls that have reached out to me and said they live in New York. So I'm really excited to eventually hang out with them. And yeah, that's it for the life updates. Let's get into the book updates. So last you saw me, I was doing let me actually see if you guys are catching my audio. Give me a second. Okay. Audio is good. So yes, let's get into the books. Last time you saw me, I was doing a review of the Yasad Heir or the Jasad Heir. And I gave it like 4 stars, 4.25. I will be reading the sequel, but I'm not like chomping at the bit to get the sequel. It comes out in July. I'll wait it out. And I was also reading A Favorite, a historical romance book. I finished that, obviously. I rated it 4 stars. Historical romance. I really enjoyed it. I especially really enjoyed the middle and the end. I loved when we started to see him open himself up to her and her realize that, oh, maybe who I thought he wasn't who he actually was. I really enjoy reading historical romance. It's the only 2 new romance books I've read this year. We'll get into the ones that I've reread, but the only 2 new ones I've read have both been historical romance, for a reason being that I find that it's me who is so allergic to bad writing. I get really anxious about reading like recently released romance books because I just think that the activation energy for my science girlies, for like basically like the barrier to entry for romances, and I say this with so much respect, it's so low that I get really anxious about like trying books because I know that it's probably not going to be up to my standard for reading, for writing, like the writing technique, the writing ability isn't going to be up to my standard. And I'm going to hate the book and I'm going to want to rate it, like DNF it or give it a bad rating and I don't want to do that because my standard isn't going to be the same as other people. Like, other people just want to read like slow romance books, and that's completely fine. Not everyone needs to have that standard. It's just a me thing. I grew up with a mom that made me read the thesaurus and the dictionary. So I realized that my standard isn't the same as everyone, and I don't want to subject other people to it with my reviews. But with historical romance, similar to fantasy, requires a level of skill that I find I can stomach. You know what I mean? Like, the skill required to write a historical romance isn't the same skill that's required to write like a contemporary based in 2025 romance. Like, it is a very, very, very different skill set. And because it's a higher skill set, because you need to know the world, that time frame, you need to know like how they spoke. You need to do a bit more research into it. Like, I can sit here and just write a contemporary romance book, like based in Nigeria, based in Canada, based wherever, and not have to do any research because it's my lived experience for the most part. But for historical romance, you absolutely do need to do a bit of research, and that research makes someone a better writer. You basically built a world. You've built a world that you never experienced. So I find that it's a safer bet for me to read historical romance, because the writers, that's the gist of this. I know I've gone on a long spiel, but basically the writers of historical romance tend to be stronger writers than people who just write normal contemporary romance. And I say that with a lot of, like, all the respect in the world. It's just that the research that goes into it makes them stronger writers, because you have to really want to write historical romance and do that research to like deliver. So the two books I've read have both been 4 stars, and they were both written well. And that's typically, I don't have to be anxious about reading a historical romance book, because I know that, like, I'm 99% certain it's going to be well written. Like, I've never read a badly written historical romance book. It's not possible for you to do all that research into how they speak, and then you end up like it's not possible in my experience. So let me just see my journal here. I have a lot of books that I've read since you last saw me. This is the YouTube content planner that I got at my first ever, like, my bookish event that I posted last week. It's by Rachel Ayo, and it's actually fantastic. It has like title of video, date of upload, all that stuff. So anyways, finished reading the favorites. Then I started reading Bone Shard Daughter, and this book, wow, I'm really sweating. I think this is the epic fantasy book of all epic fantasy books. It is a trilogy, and I'm just like, cannot wait to get into book 2, but I have a TBR for my travel, and I'm so close to finishing, so I'm holding myself back. But this book is about, it follows 4 or 5 POVs, and what I love is that the author switched between third person and first person. Some people were first person, some people were third person, so I thought that was really interesting. We're following these 5 characters. The entire world is that the emperor takes shards from people, like right behind their ears, to power his constructs, they call it. And he basically used these constructs as someone would use like a worker or like an army. It's like he doesn't really trust people, because also people can betray you, but he trusts these constructs because he can put rules into them to make sure that they follow him. It's insane. Like, I was like, that's crazy. Cause like he'll take different parts from different animals, maybe even people sometimes, and like jumble it up and make these constructs, and then take shards from his citizens. And it's called the tithing ceremony. When you turn 8 years old, I think you have to give a shard. And basically you follow these different characters. One is trying to find his lost wife. The other one is the emperor's daughter that is trying to please her father enough to be named his heir, because he has an adopted son called Bayan, and the emperor's daughter is called Lin. But the two of them, Bayan and Lin, are kind of at odds with each other, and they're competing. Made it so that only one of them will obviously be the heir to the throne. Both have to endeavor to impress him enough to get named the heir. So they're competing against one another. And then we have another character called Jovis that is trying to find his wife, and that takes into this whole journey of like inadvertently becoming some kind of hero when he doesn't mean to be. I love Jovis because he's so unlike other male MCs. He's not your shadow daddy. He's not like tall and buff. Like, he's just a funny character that is trying to do the best he can. Oh my gosh, look at like the backdrop of the light. It looks so good. But yeah, the plot twist in this book just kind of blew me away. It blew me away. It is adult fantasy. All the characters are 20 plus. The Bone Shard Daughter, I gave this 4.5 stars. And then I picked up Fireborne, another book that I just cannot wait to get into the sequel. Like, I cannot wait to get into the sequel of this book. You don't understand. It is YA fantasy. It's actually my first YA fantasy in a bit. I've been reading mainly, like, unintentionally reading mainly adult and NA fantasy. But you follow these 2 orphans. It's double POV. You follow these 2 orphans. They've made it into this elite dragon academy, and you just kind of follow them through it as they're trying to, it's like trials, as they're trying to kind of be the first rider. And we get flashbacks sometimes to the world before this. And basically the world before this was led by like this elite dragon family that one of the orphans was a part of, but like no one knows because he was supposed to be killed, but then he wasn't, and now he just like calls himself Lee, a different name, and no one knows that he is an offspring of that whole old regime that's the usurper, I guess that's what we'll call him, thought he had gotten rid of. But anyways, we get flashbacks to that old world sometimes, but we're basically seeing these two orphans. I'm really not explaining this well, but them try to like rise through the ranks and go through these trials and competitions to become what they call first writer. I love the side characters in this. I also love seeing the dynamics of their relationship, the two male MCs, Annie and Lee, because I think the author did a really interesting thing that I don't see done a lot in YA, which is that there was a lot of subtext in this book. So she's not going to over-explain and do too much and telling you exactly what this meant or that meant, or you're going to have to kind of read between the lines and pull from what the author has already told you in previous chapters to understand certain conversations or certain interactions. And I love when that's done. That's typically done in like adult fantasy, but that being done in YA fantasy, I think is fantastic writing. I gave this a 4.5, and the only reason it wasn't 5 stars is because, like I said, there were some flashbacks to the old regime that Lee was a part of, but obviously he doesn't really remember because he was like 5 when the whole revolution happened, that they tore down the old regime and they have this new one that works better for people. And also the new regime is based on like bracelets. So it goes from like bronze, which is maybe the lower class, like, or iron, and then bronze, and then silver, and that kind of thing. So it's still classist, but it's classist based on like a test that you've taken, which obviously has its own issues, but you take a test and then it puts you in a class. I'm really excited to see how they revolutionize that. I'm so excited to start the next book. But anyways, the only reason I gave it 4.5 and it wasn't 5 stars was because with the flashbacks, I felt that Lee, because he obviously eventually goes through this whole reckoning of whether or not he wants to go back to his old life, because he's not the only one from the old regime that survived. There's like other people and they want to take back what's theirs, and he gets that offer of like, join us. And so he goes through this whole thing of like, should I join them? Should I be with my, like the last family that I have, or should I stay with this new revolution? And Annie was someone who the revolution has obviously benefited her because she really suffered under the old regime. And you kind of get to see him tussle with that and navigate those different opinions and those, like, does he follow his heart or his brain? How much did the old regime really work for people versus the new regime? And I felt like we could have gotten, it almost felt like I was missing another book, like a book 0, a book that fully went over why, like, they tell you why the old regime was bad, but it felt like seeing would have been believing. And I'm not joking. I actually went to the author's page, which I never do. Hate flies. I went to the author's page because I wanted to see if she had like a book, like maybe a duology before this. I was like, am I missing something? Like I said, the flashback she gave you would have been enough for the average person. But for me, I just felt like if you're trying to decide between your family versus these new people, I mean, this is what he's known. Like we meet him when he's 17. So it's been 5 to 17, 12 years. So this is all he's known. And he sees that it works for people, the new regime. But I just felt like for me, if I'm choosing between my family and like other people, I'm going to immediately want to choose my family, even though I understood why he was kind of juggling that decision, obviously, because his family really did some terrible things to people. It just felt like the author could have gone even deeper into explaining what this old regime did and why they were so bad. Like, I don't know. I just felt like I wanted more, like, less of just like the surface level, okay, they killed this person, they did this. Like I wanted more to fully understand like more about this old regime. And I think maybe a book before this would have done that. But again, I think that's just a personal thing. I literally thought I was missing. I was like, oh, maybe she wrote a book before this about the revolution, because the revolution was its own thing. And I was like, well, that would be so cool. There was a duology before this that was basically summarizing, not like telling the story of the revolutionaries. And there wasn't, and I was like, wow, missed opportunity. But yeah, that was my only thing, was just like, ooh, I would love to just, to be able to be in Lee's head, having that additional information, for me personally, would have been key. So I gave it 4.5 stars, but still a fantastic read. I cannot wait to jump into book 2. Before we get into my next fantasy book, we are going to talk about the 2 romance books that I reread, because I felt myself entering into a bit of a slump, and I was like, I need to read a romance book, because that always helps, but it has to be a good romance book. I'm not kissing any frogs, ma'am. Not kissing any frogs. So I reread How to End a Love Story, just like my all-time favorite romance book. I love it so friggin' much, and I highly recommend it. It's just like, it's been out for like a year now, so I'm sure a lot of people have already read it, but if you haven't, you are so lucky that you get to re-experience that book. You get to experience that book for the first time. Like, I wish I could erase it and just experience it again. Once I was done that, I picked up Immortal Dark. That's what I'm still reading. I'm like 30-ish% through. I'm not usually a fan of vampire books, but this is actually really piquing my interest. If you like Ninth House, that kind of dark academia, adult dark academia, you will really enjoy this. It's single POV, but it's third person. Single POV, not usually my favorite, because then it's some to me, and this is kind of what this book is slightly suffering from, is that it feels too one-dimensional in terms of what exactly we're working towards. But we're getting to the point of the book where it's starting to have some dimension. We're starting to be 3D. But yeah, I usually don't love single POV books, but I love Kiran, our female MC. She is angry and protective, and I'm like, oh, a girl after my own heart. I love her. Immediately I saw that, like, on page 2, I was like, angry and protective of her sister. She is me, I'm her. And I also love how the book itself is like its own experience. I love, like, if I ever wrote a book, I would want it to be an experience like this. Like, you got to see like the coat of arms of the school. This is like a slip of the book she took out from the library. This is the artwork of like how the school itself looks. I just realized I haven't actually told you what this book is about, but when we meet Kidan, her twin sister, June, has been taken, essentially killed, and she's on trial for murder. Not murder of the person who took her sister, but murder of the person who she questioned to find out more about who took her sister. But then she gets approached by the dean of the school that her family has like always been a part of, but then her aunts took her away over a decade ago. And she gets approached by like, hey, if you don't come back and claim your inheritance, claim your house, it's going to go to your house's vampire. And she doesn't want that to happen because she thinks her house's vampire is the one who took her sister June. And so she's like, yeah, I'm going to enroll. And she has to pass in order to have ownership of the house. And we see her kind of go through the motions of learning about the school where they live with vampires. There's about 8 families, I think, 8 houses. And these are the only people that vampires can feed off of. There's a bunch of rules because the last sage, I think it's like a witch or something, basically made it so that vampires were not as destructive as they were in the past. And so vampires have to like live with the humans. They have to like school with them. They really have to like, they're kept in a straight line, but Kadan obviously still feels like they have way too much freedom and they should all just be scorched off the earth because she thinks that one took her sister and that one who she thinks took her sister happens to be her only house vampire, because most houses have like a bunch, but she only has one. And so they have to live together in this whole house, and it's definitely like a turbulent relationship. That's why I'm still reading, trying to figure out what exactly happened, because obviously he has not admitted to taking June, but she's trying to prove that he did. And yeah, dark academia, vampires, if that's your thing, then I highly recommend The Immortal Dark. I'm only 30% through, but the second romance book that I read while reading this was Maddest Obsession, my #1 Mafia romance book. I read this in 2021 or early 2022, and I'm still thinking of this book. It is phenomenal. Like, I own it in every single medium. Like, I think I own the audiobook, but I've never listened to it. I obviously own the actual book. I wish I had the special edition copy, but unfortunately I read the book like much after it was released and the special editions were already out and people already had them. And I also now own it on like my Kindle. I obviously don't have Kindle Unlimited anymore, so I actually bought the book because I just want it to always be there in case I ever want to read it. I cannot recommend this book enough. It is so friggin' good. Daniel Laurie is an incredibly strong writer. Similar to what I said in the beginning, I find that romance books, especially Mafia romance, tend to be very, very cringy. The writing, not very good, not very strong. And so I don't personally like to, dip my feet in. I tried last year to find another 5-star Mafia romance book, and I didn't really find one. And so really, it's still just Maddest Obsession, the Made series by Daniel Laurie, and J.T. Geisinger, Queens and Monsters. Ruthless Creatures is my second favorite Mafia romance book. Those are the only 2 that I can with my chest recommend and say that yes, the writing is strong. I actually think I'll reread it again tonight because I'm so obsessed. This is my second to the last book on my TBR that I brought with me on vacation. The next book is the one by Daniel L. Jensen. I forget the name. It's the blue one. I will put it up here. I don't think I'm going to get to it because I leave this Friday. It's Sunday, and I leave this Friday. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you in the next video. I will probably be in my apartment in New York by the next time you see me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.